Hi, I'm Ashton. I'm going to teach you about the founding fathers of the United States of America. So, I better get in my fancy clothes. Here we go. George Washington. First, I'm going to tell you about George Washington. George Washington was born on February 22nd, 1732 in Westmoreland County, Virginia. He had 4 older step-siblings and 5 younger siblings. George's father owned plantations, businesses, and mines. When George was a boy, he did not chop down a church. Sadly, when George was 11, his father died. George went to live with his half-brother Lawrence in Mount Vernon. George did not have an education, but he became a surveyor. At the age of 16, George became the surveyor of the Culpeper County. In 1752, Lawrence died. George became head of Mount Vernon. He became wealthy. Slaves did the work. In 1754, George fought in the French and Indian War. George became commander of Virginia's troops. George also served in the House of Burgesses. In 1759, George married Martha Dandridge Custis, a widow with 2 children. They had no children, but George took care of her 2 children. George was not very happy with Britain. George protested against taxes. The Boston Tea Party happened. On April 19, 1775, shots were heard. A war had begun. George was picked to be the general of the Americans. The Americans did not start off very good. In the Battle of Bunker Hill, the Americans lost, but it was a win because they learned the ways of the British. Then George had an idea. At night, George and other troops sailed across the frozen Delaware River. Then they launched a surprise attack on the British. It was very successful. George became loyal partners with Alexander Hamilton. Then, in the Battle of Yorktown, they surrounded the British, and they surrendered. The rough 6 years of fighting were finally over. The Americans had won the Revolutionary War. Now America needed organized. In 1787, George served as president of the Constitutional Convention. Their representatives designed the U.S. government. They laid out a document called the Constitution. After the states accepted the Constitution, a group of men called electors chose George to be the first president of the U.S. John Adams became the vice president. George also appointed Alexander Hamilton as the treasurer, Thomas Jefferson as the Secretary of State, Henry Knox as Secretary of War, and Edmund Randolph as the Attorney General. As president, George made a way for the president and Senate to make treaties with other countries, and gave a State of the Union address every year. Some people thought George would be president forever, but he retired in Mount Vernon after 2 terms. George resided in Mount Vernon for the rest of his life. George was afraid of being buried alive, so he told mourners to wait at least 3 days before burying him, just in case. On December 14, 1799, George died of a throat infection. 3 days later, a funeral was held. George was buried on his property in Mount Vernon. George's legacy lives on to today. Washington, D.C. Monument and the state of Washington are named after George. George's face is on the $1 bill, quarter, and carved into Mount Rushmore. So let's all remember George as a president, war general, father, husband, surveyor, founding father, and hero. This is him on the $1 bill. Thomas Jefferson. Now I'm going to teach you about Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was born on April 13th, 1743 at Shadwell Plantation in Virginia. When he was 3, he traveled 50 miles on horseback with his father. Thomas had a good education. Thomas explored the woods, read books, and studied. He enrolled in the College of William and Mary when he was 17 years old. He practiced law and served in the local government. In 1772, Thomas married Martha Wales Skelton. They would have no children together, but take care of 6 children as their own. The couple moved to Monticello. Thomas was an architect, inventor, and farmer. Thomas was tall and had lots of freckles. He loved to write more than talk. The Revolutionary War began in 1775. Though America was not yet free, Thomas decided to write down a document proclaiming the colony's freedom from King George and Britain. The now 33-year-old Thomas drafted the Declaration of Independence. Thomas received some input from John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and Robert Livingston, but Thomas was the primary author of the Declaration. It was finished on July 4th, 1776, our country's birthday. During the Revolutionary War, Thomas served 3 years as the governor of Virginia. When the Americans won the war, Thomas served in Congress. Thomas then served as ambassador in France. He spent 4 years in the post. During his lifetime, Thomas invented some things including the revolving bookstand, the dumbwaiter, the great clock, the wheel cipher, the iron plow, the macaroni machine, the pentameter, and of course the Lazy Susan, which was great for playing games on. When George Washington was elected as the first president, he picked Thomas to be the first Secretary of State for the U.S. Thomas clashed and disagreed with Alexander Hamilton, who was the first treasurer of the U.S. In 1797, George Washington decided to step down and not run again for president. Thomas ran for president against John Adams. John Adams ended up beating Thomas. The rules at the time made Thomas become the vice president. 4 years later, Thomas insisted on running for president again. This time, Thomas won. It was very close between Thomas and Aaron Burr. Alexander Hamilton helped Thomas win even though he hated him. Hamilton just hated Burr more. While being the president, the biggest choice Thomas made was to buy the Louisiana Purchase, which was 828,000 square miles of land, doubling the size of the nation. Thomas sent Lewis and Clark to explore it. They learned a lot about the terrain. After serving 2 terms as president, Thomas retired. Thomas went to a mansion that he built in Monticello. In 1819, Thomas helped create the University of Virginia. Thomas kept writing for the rest of his life. Thomas died on July 4th, 1826, exactly 50 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed. Thomas was 83 years old. Hours later, John Adams, Thomas's rival and friend, died. Thomas was buried in the Monticello graveyard. Thomas's legacy lives on today. His face is on the nickel and the $2 bill, as you see here. His face is also carved into Mount Rushmore in Keystone, South Dakota. We should remember Thomas as a president, writer, inventor, founding father, husband, father, and a hero. Now I'm going to teach you about Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton was born on January 11th, 1757 in Nevis in the Caribbean. He was the youngest of 2 children. Alexander was not allowed to go to the local Christian school, but was still very smart. He loved to read. The Hamilton family moved to St. Croix, a nearby island. Then Alexander's father abandoned them. Alexander's mother opened a shop to earn money. It struggled. Sadly, Alexander's mother died of a fever. Alexander and his brother James were sent to live with a cousin. Later, the cousin committed suicide, so they lived with one of his mother's friends, a man named Thomas Stevens. Alexander made friends with Thomas's son Edward. They talked about going to America and making their fortunes. At this time, Alexander worked and traded for a man named Nicholas Kruger. Alexander got to be in charge of the company when Kruger got sick. When a hurricane hit, Alexander wrote a letter to his father. A minister put it in the newspaper. Kruger saw it and made it fun for Alexander. Now Alexander could go to America. Alexander could not get into Princeton, so he went to King's College in New York. Alexander and his friends formed the Hearts of Oak. When the Revolutionary War began, the group stole cannons from the British. Then Alexander joined the war. Alexander was a captain in the artillery, which ran all the cannons. In 1780, Alexander married a woman named Elizabeth Schuyler. They had 8 children together: Philip and Helica, Alexander Jr., James, John, William, Elizabeth, and Philip, named after his older brother. Meanwhile, in the Revolutionary War, the Americans were coming close to winning. Alexander was George Washington's favorite, and their friendship began on the battlefield. Alexander was able to lead an army in the Battle of Yorktown, and the British surrendered. The Americans were free. Now that the America was free from Britain, it needed to be organized. Alexander played a big role in the organizing as founding father. Alexander and some others founded the New York Manumission Society, which helped slaves. Then Alexander wrote the Constitution of the Bank of New York, which is a company that still exists today. In 1789, George Washington became the first president of the U.S., and he decided to appoint Alexander as the first treasurer of the U.S., as he knew that Alexander was good with money. It was a pretty hard job. When the Founding Fathers picked a spot between Virginia and Maryland, which they would call Washington, D.C., as the capital, they told Alexander to make a bank there. Alexander called it the Bank of America, and it is used today on the back of the $10 bill. When John Adams became the second president, Alexander was a lawyer. He had affairs with a woman and his wife, but his wife stuck with him through the whole ordeal. Later, Alexander and his family moved to a house called the Grange. Meanwhile, Alexander had made enemies with a man named Aaron Burr. Alexander helped Thomas Jefferson beat Burr in the presidential election. A man named George Eaker was mean to Alexander. Philip, Alexander's son, stood up for his father, and Eaker killed him in a duel. Aaron Burr challenged Alexander to a duel. Alexander shot to the sky and was shot. He died the next day, July 12, 1804. Alexander's legacy lives on to today. A massively creative man named Lin-Manuel Miranda created the screenplay Hamilton on Broadway. Alexander's face is on the $10 bill. Let's remember Alexander as an island boy, father, husband, founding father, and hero. Now, I'm going to tell you about Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was born on January 17, 1706 in Boston, Massachusetts. He was number 15 out of 17 children. Benjamin went to school for only 2 years, from when he was 8 to 10, but he was still very smart. He loved to read. He didn't like arithmetic. When he was 11, Benjamin made his first invention, the swim flippers. They were for your hands. One time, Benjamin rode his kite across a lake. Benjamin gave meat for books. Josiah, Benjamin's father, sent Benjamin to work at a printing press with his brother James. It was Benjamin's job to sell the newspapers. While there, Benjamin made up a character named Silas Dogood. People liked it. Benjamin finally said that he was Silas a year later. After this, Benjamin escaped to New York. He could find no work, so he went to Philadelphia. He found a job. He had to go to London. While there, he was stranded. He swam 3 miles. Benjamin married a woman named Deborah Reed. They had 3 children, William, or Billy, Francis, who died of smallpox when he was 4, and Sally. Benjamin made newspapers such as the Pennsylvania Gazette and Poor Richard's Almanac, which were both very popular. Benjamin had enough money to retire, but he became an inventor. Benjamin invented the Franklin stove. It was a heater to put into an existing hearth. Next, Benjamin invented the lightning rod. It's a rod that goes on a roof. It absorbs lightning shocks. One night when it was thunderstorming, Benjamin out with a kite with a key on it. The kite got shocked by lightning. The key stopped some of the shock. It was a shocking discovery. Now for the best part. When Benjamin was a founding father. In April of 1775, the Revolutionary War began. America longed to be free from Britain. Benjamin was very into the war. Benjamin began helping Thomas Jefferson and others write the Declaration of Independence. On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration was completed. It was our country's birthday. Benjamin signed it. Billy, Benjamin's son, was the King of England's appointed governor. Benjamin begged him to quit, but Billy never did. Benjamin did not forgive his son. Here's a funny fact. Most of the British were more scared of Benjamin than George Washington and his whole army. They thought Benjamin was a wizard. Benjamin asked the French to help the Americans win the war. They said yes. The Americans won the war in 1783. Benjamin wanted the turkey to be the national bird, but the bald eagle was picked. Benjamin founded the first insurance company in America. He became the governor of Pennsylvania. There was almost a state called Franklin between North Carolina and Tennessee, but they made it part of Tennessee. Benjamin invented the bifocals for glasses and the artificial arm for his library to reach books. For his last inventions. Benjamin died on April 17th, 1790. More than 20,000 people gathered at his funeral. Although he died over 230 years ago, Benjamin's legacy lives on today. As you see, his face is on the $100 bill. So let's remember Benjamin as a printing boy, father, husband, inventor, founding father, and hero. Some other founding fathers were John Adams. He was a founding father. He was the second president of the United States and also the first vice president of the United States. Also, James Madison was a founding father. He was the fourth president of the United States. His face was on the $500 bill, which is not in use today. And John Hancock was a founding father. He was famous for having a giant signature on the Declaration of Independence. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.